All right, and we are recording. So, I am Thomas Jonas. I am the founder of the Chicago Sustainability Series. This is Friday, June 26th. We are kicking off our second season in 2020, which is certainly a remarkable year. I am joined by Thomas Jonas, the CEO of Nature's Fynd. Nature's Fynd is a new company focused on revolutionizing our food system with utilizing proteins from fermentation and from Yellowstone geysers. And Thomas is going to tell us a little bit about his background and what got him into the food space. And then we're going to discuss why this type of company, especially a Chicago-based company, is so well poised and so important. And so with that, Thomas, if you could tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you into this space. And thank you so much for kicking off the second season of the Chicago Sustainability Series with us.
Hey, thanks for having me on the podcast, and I'm very excited to kick the new season. It's like I feel like it's an honor. I feel like I'm cutting the ribbons. It's very, very exciting to be here. Well, so just a little bit about me, and I'll try to keep it short because I'm not the most interesting guy. I'm just a guy. If the accent you might detect right now, that your listener might detect, is actually not a Southern Illinois accent. I know it kind of sounds like it, but I'm sorry to disappoint. I'm actually French. I did my best, but you know, I can't pass, I guess, right? So I'm actually French, born and raised in France, born and raised in Paris, close to Paris. I have been in the US for about 16, 17 years by now. So I've been here for about 17 years, and I came as an expat for a French company. And I actually, the funny thing is I did most of my career in the US in the packaging industry. So basically my previous life was a life where you can make a case that I was filling the ocean with plastic. So I like to think about what I do now in a way as a story of redemption. But it might be giving me myself a little too much credit here. I think fundamentally what I'm trying to do and what we're trying to do here is what we can. We're trying to do our part. We're trying to find ways to change things around us with a positive impact, and specifically a positive sustainability impact. Global warming is real. Science is real. Temperatures are going up. This is not a matter of debate. Those things are fact. They are pretty simple. And we all know and understand that our food system is a big factor in that. So what we're set up to do is to try to do our part in diminishing the footprint of our food supply in terms of negative environmental footprint. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help resolve that. And we're trying to do that in a way that, solve as many of the challenges that we're facing today, whether they're social, whether they are, technology. But having in mind, of course, that we're talking about food, and food has to be good. So one of the parameters that plays in the equation here is that it has to taste good. It has to be good food. So that's what I do in a nutshell.
And there's a couple things you touched upon there. It's the intersectionality there, and I want to also remind folks that you've also served as an officer in the French Air Force, and you mentioned one of the things I really appreciate, that aside from the service, but the folks who are coming together to work on climate change solutions, whether that is in the environmental advocacy space, whether it's in the nonprofit space, the private sector, food, energy, etc. So many folks are coming from another space. Personally, before I previously worked in renewable energy development, particularly in early stage solar project development, and our director of operations used to do oil sand development in Canada. And our joke around the office was that he was working off his carbon debt. But I appreciate you touching upon that, because every single person is coming from a certain place, and that is not that should not preclude anybody from getting involved or feeling like they are part of the solution.
No, I think that's a really important point, actually. I think we all come with a history and baggage. When I was a kid growing up in France, I remember seeing people in their cars when they were driving, and if they were drinking something while driving and they were done drinking it, they would just toss it through the window. And like, I'm dating myself here a little bit, or we're talking about the 70s probably, and I think it was the same in the US, right? So there was not a sense of the limitation of the resources that we're currently feeling much more acutely. So there was not a sense of the frailty of our ecosystem, and how this was just this little pale blue dot that we're living on. I think that sense is something that became more real to all of us as humans over the past couple of decades, maybe. And I think we kind of knew, but there is really this acceleration going on, right? I think we knew that maybe it wasn't great to just toss something through the window, right? I think we always knew, but I think in a way, it's another thing that you can kind of parallel that to is people smoking. Smoking used to be a common, cool thing to do. You didn't think twice about that. There's so many ways, so many parallel actually, and even the way you can see the way the tobacco company were spinning the fact that there's no problem here is very similar to the way the oil and gas industry have been spinning that there is no problem going on here, right? So I think it is to be expected that there is going to be a lot of people that are coming from somewhere else that start to understand that our actions have consequences. And once you have established that baseline, the next question becomes, okay, what can I do? And it's important to get to what can I do, because there is, like, don't wait for a magical angel to come and solve all of our problems. So I think there is an ethic of responsibility here. And I'm actually fascinated and incredibly optimistic about the Gen Zs, the younger folks, and the realization that they have that they are going to be the ones doing the work, and they're fine with it. I mean, they're not necessarily happy every day, but one of the things that I find fascinating is that this generation that was born facing all of these challenges is actually the most optimistic generation, and I think that should it's going to be the greatest generation ever. I'm so excited to see those guys.
There's
because I'm an older guy here. I dated myself from childhood to the 70s, so
I'm starting to feel that, like, it's, especially in the current flashpoint we're in, it reminded me, so like my awareness of global issues and where does this stuff all start and where can I try to contribute to a better solution. I was in middle school during 9/11. And so that was my like flashpoint of, okay, here's the issues that have been going on historically, here's the flashpoint we're in, and here's this new reality. And so now to see the flashpoints that we're experiencing right now, it's really remarkable to see how this new generation is handled. I'm going to do a very goofy example. I'll sometimes like be on TikTok, and there'll be goofy videos, and it's predominantly Gen Z, but like just integrated in this very like dada goofy format are like I don't want to say children, but like young teenagers, like teaching people about like intersectional racism, about immigration rights, about climate change, about what have you. And it's so remarkable to see how fast attitudes can change generationally when you have such a rapid mode of information transmission. And so anyway, I'm glad that we share this optimism in the new generation. I want to come back to Nature's Fynd, because again, it it also is about creating a better world right now and then for the future. So you all are using 99% less land, 87% less water than standard beef production. Can you talk a little bit more about what the phi, I believe, protein is, and what that's actually going to be like when it's something I can take out of my freezer? Because I know you all are going to commercialization, and then I want to talk about what happened in March from there.
So what the hell is this thing, Phi, right? It's that we're going to be launching soon. It's a new protein. It's a new to the world protein. It is not an animal protein. It is not a plant-based protein. Right? It's neither nor. So let me backtrack a little bit and to give some context here. So the company really started from a research project for NASA. And the goal of the research was to try to figure if NASA was going to send a probe to a moon of Saturn or to Mars or to some distant asteroid out there, what would be the envelope of conditions in which it would make sense to look for life, right? So think about it. You want to go and check for life at the bottom of the methane lakes on Titan, or you want to go and check in the geysers of Enceladus that are shooting thousands of miles into space, or Jupiter. I mean, we have a sense of how life is organized on this planet, but fundamentally what we have is a data point of one. We know life on planet Earth. So far, we haven't seen it anywhere else. We don't know how it could be organized, how it could be structured, in which environment it could live. So considering that there's so many planets that are, or environment outside of ours that are not like Earth, it is very likely, if there is life out there, that it's not organized the way it is here, and that it's not experiencing similar conditions. So that train of thought took us to a very different place than the rest of planet Earth, and that is the acidic volcanic springs of Yellowstone National Park. So Yellowstone National Park is, for those who are not familiar, it's in the northwest of the US. It is, the greater Yellowstone Basin is about half the size of Switzerland. It's a pretty large basin. It is basically the biggest supervolcano on the planet. It is sitting on a huge lava chamber, and it is active. So there is regularly small little volcanic eruption, earthquakes. I mean, not volcanic eruption, but small earthquakes. And what happens over there is the snow that accumulates in the winter melts, gets into the ground, and these waters get heated by the lava and go through blocks of sulfur, blocks of minerals, and when they come out through these springs and sometimes through these geysers, the composition of these waters are amazing. So we studied the spring, which is at a pH equivalent to your car battery. So it's a very, it's like a little acidic spring that comes out of the ground. And pretty much anything that would fall in it would die, because it's an extraordinarily harsh environment for us. But this is fundamentally a story of optimism and a story of life finding a way. Because across many centuries, thousands of years actually, microbial organisms managed to colonize these very unique environments. And so those microbes, there must have been an incredible, we can't even fathom the number of microbes that probably fell in it over time and just died. But one day, for some random reason, one of them just managed to get in. And so there is this limited amount of microbial strains, and they're called Extremophile because they adapt to these extreme organisms, that have been able to adapt to this incredible environment. They are hot, they are acidic, they have high sulfur concentration. I mean, it is like another planet. So we discovered a bunch of new to the world life form that had never been discovered before. And in particular, we discovered one organism, one microbe, which became Phi. And this organism, this microorganism is not a plant, it's not an animal, it's actually part of this third branch of life that is all around us, that we always forget, which is the fungi realm. So when you say fungi, you're going to think, oh, it's like a mushroom. Not really. It's not really like a mushroom. It would be misleading to say it's like a mushroom. It's like a macroscopic organism. It's a microbe that is part of that fungi realm. What's interesting about the fungi realm is that they're actually, funny enough, closer to animals than they are to plants. So in the tree of life, they separated from us animals later than we collectively separated from plants. So they're closer to us. So that's also one of the reasons why they are their cellular machinery, if you will, is closer to that of an animal than to that of a plant, which, it's kind of surprising. When we think about mushroom, we think, hey, at the grocery stores, they are put with a vegetable, so that's a vegetable. It's not actually. It's this other branch of life that's there. So there are lots of fungi, right? Right now, as you are listening or as we're talking, we are all breathing in and out fungi spores and other microbes and all. And don't freak out. I mean, it's normal. That's our planet's or ecosystem that the world we live in. The thing that's really interesting, I think, is that because this organism had to adapt and it had to evolve in this environment, it became a master at doing more with less. And to me, there is no better way to describe what we need to do as a species in the next decades. We need to learn to do more with less. And this organism is a master at it. It went through a very unique evolutionary pressure to really become very, very good at that. And the reason is pretty simple. If you're living in an acidic spring, you better not be a picky eater. You'd better be good at eating whatever you can find, right? And what it really means is that it developed this spectacular enzymatic capability. So, long story short, we discovered this organism and we developed a completely novel fermentation process. And fermentation is really a word that actually means cultivation of microbes. So we developed a way to cultivate this microbe. And fundamentally what we do is we feed it a simple sugar, simple form of sugar, whether it's starch or fructose or some simple sugar that's available everywhere in the world. We had a few things in a growth media just to make sure it's optimal for its development. And by the way, we don't have to put the sulfur, we don't have to put all these things. We just made it very nice for it, and it's completely food grade. And then it grows. We grow it, we cultivate it the same way you would, grow carrots or raise cows in a way. But we do that in a tray, in a very simple tray-based system. There's a lot that we had to invent because there is no book out there that tells you how to cultivate an unknown extremophile, acidophile organism. So it took us a few years. And fast forward to where we are now. We are in the south side of Chicago. We are in the process of scaling up our technology. And we are actually located here in the old stockyard. So we're really bringing this new protein source really as a plug-in into the old protein world, which I find very interesting. And so that's what we are. That's what we are up to here in the south side of Chicago.
One of the things that really, all of this is so remarkable. I mean, there's so much innovation and miracle there in the sense of like, there had to be NASA like looking to like, where's life? Where are we going to go? I mean, the amount of things that had to happen, and again, that crossover, that multidisciplinary is so beautifully on display here. But one of the things that really stuck out to me when we spoke beforehand, and you were talking about the poetry of working by the stockyards, was it's the same ground. And that is,
it's literally the
yeah.
same ground, the same space we're sharing. We are literally located here in the very same space where a few decades ago stood a building, a different building, where about 300,000 pigs were stored on a daily basis before being processed. So it's kind of interesting that happens to be the same physical location. That building is gone. You know, we're in a different building, but it is the same physical location. So you're right. There is some irony here.
And you know, around March, you all had the really nice press release that you had just, you know, raised 80 million. You were in construction on a 35,000 square foot new facility, but that was also March 2020. And I would appreciate if you could speak to how the pandemic either impacted, or, you know, some internal thinking, or how you all responded to it. And also how, at a time when our own standard, you know, meat production and harvesting is changing and is being challenged, maybe where you see the importance of additional revolutionary protein sources that are also better for the environment. But yeah, I really appreciate your perspective on that tiny question.
Yeah, so the past few months have been, of course, for everyone, quite an interesting time, to say the least. For us, and you mentioned the timing. I mean, we had a great event schedule, you know, right there in March, where we were going to have our pilot plant ribbon cutting ceremony with the mayor of Chicago and the governor of Illinois. So we were very excited. And of course, you know, the week before I canceled everything. And then we all, you know, that's when the epidemic started. As a matter of fact, we closed our second round of funding the very day the stock market crashed for the first time. So it kind of felt, you know, as being on a money-raising journey is always an adventure, but this one really felt like in the old Indiana Jones movie, you know, when he snatches the statuette and he runs and there's the boulder running, you know, in his back, and he just dodges and gets out before getting crushed by the boulder. That's how the fundraising kind of felt. But this being said, and you know, we had some challenges that everyone experienced around the, you know, closing, logistics, safety for everyone, of course. But what has been absolutely fascinating, I think, was to see how in this sector in which we work, just like as in so many sectors and so many sides of our society, COVID is the great accelerator. Trends which were there before suddenly are just accelerating, and we are, you know, we are thrown 10 years in the future. And I think it is true in so many aspects of what we've been seeing over the past few months, and what we will continue to see, I'm convinced, as this thing subsides. But one of the very interesting things that happened during COVID is the explosion of alternative protein. Across the world, alternative protein have surged very, very significantly, doubling, tripling in volume. And it's not purely, by the way, linked to some of the challenges that the meat supply experience. I mean, of course, when it takes a presidential order to keep a meat factory open, you can worry. And I think we've all seen the news how in so many countries across the world, plant factories, I mean, meat factories turn out to be big COVID hotspots. And it's really because of the working conditions there. There is no question. So there's been that impact of the meat supply being challenged, but there's also been some additional health concern on the part of consumers that really tend to make them think twice about consuming more meat for all the reasons that we already know. So I think with all that in mind, that really drove an increase in demand, which I think will be lasting. I have no doubt on this. And just as a kind of illustration of that, we've been tracking consumer sentiment on what we do. And what I mean by that is we did this work with Nielsen a few months ago, where we basically describe to consumer what we're doing. And we say, hey, we found this microbe. It's a fungi. We found it in a volcanic spring in Yellowstone. We're making food out of it. Are you interested in trying? And before COVID, we were at about 53% of people who say, yeah, I want to try. 53% is actually a surprisingly high number. You know, think about it. 53% of people agreeing on anything is a pretty high number.
Oh, that'd be amazing on anything.
But, and frankly, thinking that you're asking people if they're ready to eat microbes, that is even more surprising. But what is even more fascinating is we redid this exercise about a month ago, so, you know, pretty deep into the COVID epidemic. And that sentiment rose from 53% to 66%. So 2/3 of the population, and that's general population,
wow,
in the US are basically saying, yeah, I'm interested in trying. Sounds cool. But if you think about it, you know, think about kombucha, right? You can stop into any gas station anywhere in the US and find kombucha. And these things was just not on anybody's radar before. So I think our food habits are much more flexible than we think they are. And we've seen again and again new things come. You know, think about anything from coconut water to, of course, plant-based burger to kombucha to, I mean, these things, you know, chia seeds, and you know, and we can go on and on and on. And these things continuously come into our food chain and find a place. So to get back to your question, so the past few months have been, of course, somewhat challenging for us in terms of organizing the scale up of our technology, but it's not very much actually, because, you know, we might be a little bit late, but not that much. But fundamentally, the market is becoming more and more interested in what we're doing, and so that is fundamentally exciting. And I think those are deep trends. I don't think those are just flash in the pan. I think it's driven by a few things that are pretty obvious, right? It's driven by climate change that makes the amount of resources that we need to dedicate to meat more and more problematic. It's driven by the need in the coming decades to feed an exploding population. So the 10 billion are just around the corner. It's going to happen very, very fast. And we just don't have the resources to feed everyone. I'm sure everyone is familiar with these numbers. You know, the amount of water, the amount of land dedicated to the animal protein chain is phenomenal. And if it's already breaking the bank at 8 billion people, you can imagine what it's going to do at 10, 11. So that's why having a way to produce protein in a glorified warehouse in the south side of Chicago is interesting. And as you mentioned, using a fraction of the land, using a fraction of the water, using a fraction of the resources, and that's what we are striving to do here.
Again, I'm gonna wear out this word remarkable and just revolutionary. Everything you're describing, there's, you know, two immediate questions come to mind, and I think you're touching upon both of these. One is, as the head of this ship, and I know you have this remarkable team that makes all of this possible, and you also have, you alluded to it, like there has been support within the state, from a market and kind of policy environment. But what is it like to be leading this ship during, such a flashpoint time, but also building the track as you're driving, to mix a couple metaphors?
Well, I think it's more like we are, building the plane while flying it and selling the tickets to fly in the plane. So because there is a lot of demand, people are very interested, how soon can you bring this? We have to move fast on all of this. So the team that we have is, I love our team. It's really a collection of awesome people. There is one recruiting criteria that is essential: curiosity. The number one criteria for hiring whatever function is curiosity. So it's a bunch of very curious people coming from everywhere, of all creeds, race, religion, whatever, but animated by the same goals and aspirations here. So, as we move forward, I think that, and let me answer your question about Illinois and Chicago and policies in a little bit of a broader sense, because I don't think it's necessarily specifically a local thing to think about. First of all, I think there's a few things that I think we need to keep in mind. First, the first thing is, in the coming decades, the majority of population will be in cities, right? So having policies that take that into account and that do not necessarily assume that food has to come from, that actually have to, having policies that can factor in the fact that you can grow food in cities and it should actually encourage that, I think would make sense. And so that's important for a place like Chicago to keep in mind. I mean, Chicago could be, what we're trying to do here is put Chicago back on the map on the protein production, right? The second thing is the sort of opposition between this new and this old, we being the new agriculture and this other classic agriculture being the old agriculture. I don't see it like that at all. I see it as a continuum and an evolution of technology, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What is phenomenal about agriculture, is that it is fundamentally the same technology that we've been using for 11,000 years. The changes have been very incremental and very limited, but basically we're still relying on a handful of plants and a handful of animals that we started to domesticate about 11,000 years ago. If you can make a mental list of the number of animals and the number of plants, it's ridiculously small if you think about it. I think there is less than 10 plants that account for something like 60% of the calories that we eat worldwide. And there are millions of species out there, right? So we have this technology that has been focused on a very limited amount of strains, and we're cultivating very much in the same manner. What we are proposing here is to add to this list a completely forgotten group that we couldn't see before, that we kind of have been using without really knowing it, which are microbes. There are millions of them. There are billions of them, as a matter of fact. They are very, very, very efficient. Why don't we domesticate some of them and use them for what they can provide? So that is fundamentally why we call the company Nature's Fynd. What we're doing here is using something we found in nature. This is not a genetically engineered product, something we found in nature. yeah, we had to look in a different place. We had to think a little bit differently. But that's what you have to do if you want to bring some innovation, right? But fundamentally, we believe that nature has the answer to a question that we can barely formulate in many cases, and that's why we call the company Nature's Fynd. And so it's Fynd with a Y, and it's really because the organism is a fusarium, and it's the fusarium from Yellowstone, and hence the Y from Yellowstone. So it was a little bit of a kind of a distant reference for, and hence the name.
You can put the poetry in a lot of areas.
That's right. That's right. So I think, you know, for a place like Illinois, which has both this, one of the largest cities in America and a very deep agricultural history and, you know, a lot of lands, you know, one of the largest producer of corn, soybean in the country, we actually use some of the byproducts of that, of this agriculture. So we're not going to put the farmers out of business. We might put some ranchers out of business, that's for sure. But, you know, we still need some sugar, and we still need these things. We're just going to be much more efficient at transforming that into a protein than a cow is. And fundamentally, it is about efficiency. And fundamentally, it is, once again, about learning to do more with less. So we can get a much better use of the land, a much better use of the resources. And that is what we need to do if we want to have a better hospitable planet. That's a requirement. So I think the more policies can factor these things in, the better it will be. I think it is important to see these things, you know, this sort of new and old as not new and old, but just the continuation of the technology voyage that we've all been on since, you know, we moved on from hunter-gathering to starting agriculture. We are cultivating biological system the same way a farmer is. There is fundamentally no difference there.
One of what really stuck out to me, and I agree and appreciate with everything you're saying, is your focus on continuum. I think there can be, and you know, it's human to reduce things to polarity, or just that it's either or, good or bad. As opposed to, no, when we have new technology, when we have new opportunities, they are usually the result of a lot of interdisciplinary things. It does not inherently mean that like everything that has come before is bad. And it also speaks to the complexities of other industries and related industries. You know, I'll give you an example. You know, within the solar development space, I spent a fair amount of time in urban, suburban, and rural Illinois, talking to landowners, whether those were government entities, whether they were third-generation farmers, where leases were signed at the local subway in a town of like maybe 800, where you had the patriarch who's maybe in his 60s or 70s, his son is in his 40s, and, you know, the third generation who's maybe 9 or 10 playing, it wasn't even a Nintendo Switch. I feel old now because I didn't even recognize what it was, but some version of a, you know, handheld device. And, you know, the whole point is, if they have 100 acres, put 20 acres into solar, because in theory, that's going to be more steady revenue as opposed to soy and beans, given the recent volatility with China and Latin America, and just kind of how those markets shift, and the idea of, oh, 20 to 30 years of lease payments for part of my land allows me to have more security. And this was calculus that suburban, urban, and rural landowners were doing. And it can be really easy in the climate change, sustainability, environmental space to center it on just one population, on just like, oh, there's just this one population that views X, Y, you know, something like climate change or sustainability as one thing, or as, you know, a preferable perspective, as opposed to recognizing, okay, maybe the cities have the role of purchasing subscriptions, or, you know, helping to push this type of policy. But if you frame it in a different way in rural Illinois, and you focus on the jobs of the tax base, or opportunities for returning citizens, or, you know, more stability and for landowners, etc., you can see urban and rural communities moving on climate change in different ways that go in hand. And it's a long tangent, but I don't think that continuity and that appreciation for interdisciplinary collaboration gets talked about enough. And it's one of the things that I really respect and appreciate about what you're doing. If I could shift to a fun question, because that was a wordy, heavy. Can you tell me more about the product line you guys have planned? I know, you have this protein that provides 9 essential amino acids. You're looking at food, beverage, kind of the whole suite. That's got to be incredibly exciting on a product development side. I would love to hear a little bit more about that as well.
Yeah, so what's interesting about our protein is that it is a complete protein with all the essential amino acid, which is pretty unusual for a non-animal protein source. And without getting too much in the technical side here, but not all protein sources are equal, right? There are these essential amino acid that you cannot synthesize if they are not in your food and you need them. And if you want to not have animal protein, there are only a limited amount of them. Soy being one of the sources of complete protein, but they're really not that many. Pea is not. And there's a lot of other protein sources that are not complete. It's a little bit like you get a car with 3 wheels. You might be able to move forward, but there's a point it's going to be a problem, right? So it is important, and you hear often people talking about mixing various types, rice and beans, and to kind of supplement these things. But not everyone is walking around, with a very clear map in mind of which protein and which essential amino acid is being supplied or not supplied by this or that source. So it turns out that ours is a great source of essential, complete protein. One thing that's interesting also is that we develop a technology that leverages the filamentous nature of the organism. So it kind of has natively filaments that resemble muscle filaments. It's not the same thing, but it has an inner structure. So what we're talking about here is not something that is like tofu, right? It is something that is, when we harvest it, that kind of looks like a slice of raw chicken breast.
Wow.
So we have this natively, because we pick it up from the liquid where we grow it, we really pick up this, imagine again, this slice of raw chicken breast. It has a sort of texture of a raw chicken breast. That's the closest I can describe to you. And it's very different than what you do typically in plant-based protein, where you have to extract the protein flour from a soybean or a pea. And once you have this protein flour, you have to process it to create a texture, and then you have to process the water back in. We don't have to do any of these things. We natively harvest this texture and moist protein. And then once we have it, we can form it and flavor it in a way that enables us to address meat alternative as well as dairy alternative. So
that's wonderful.
If you think about it, it's not that different than what you do with a cow. You can eat the cow, or you can drink the milk, or you can make yogurt, right? There's no reason. I mean, it sounds surprising that we can do both of these things, but actually, it makes a lot of sense. And when we can, these changes, making it, like if we want to make a strawberry yogurt, we do a second fermentation with the, lactic bifidus kind of organism, and we put strawberry in it, and it tastes like a strawberry yogurt. It's just like you would with milk. And of course, we can also make, meat alternative. So those things are, what we had to do to be able to achieve these things is, of course, a lot of R&D work. It took us a lot of time because, again, there is no book out there that tells you how to invent that. So you have to ask a lot of questions. You have to try again and again and again. And one of the attributes that we needed to achieve was a fair, neutral taste initially. So it sounds boring to have a neutral taste. Actually, it's not. And you take a piece of chicken breast and you just put it in the microwave, no salt, nothing. You'll see it basically has no taste, right? So the taste is coming from the combination of fat, from the combination of spices, from the treatment of the thermal treatment of all of these things together. All of these things contribute to taste, but protein has to be bland, right? So developing, think about it, finding a fungal, a fungi, a microbial fungi in the wild, then finding a way to cultivate it, and then finding a way to cultivate it in a way that it has no much taste. All of these seem simple. Believe me, they're not. There was a lot of work to get there. But that enabled us to go through all of these formats, food format. And our goal is really to be able to provide you with a product that based on Phi, this better for you protein and better for the planet protein at pretty much any one of your eating occasions. So you want something for breakfast, we can be there. You want something for snack, we can have something for you. You want something for lunch, you want a soup, we can be in all of these formats. So I'm not gonna tell you exactly what we're gonna start with because I wanna surprise you a little bit. I don't want to spoil the surprise, but hopefully you'll see that pretty soon. Actually, I think we're planning on launching early next year, so it's coming pretty fast.
That's wonderful, and I apologize for interrupting. I grew up cooking. I probably started cooking around 8, 9, 10, and so when you're describing like finding that neutrality, so you can take that protein and turn it into a snack, or you can turn it into something like to create like dairy type products, or like a meat or a chicken. That's incredibly fascinating to me. And what was going through my head is like, oh, okay, I could cook this with, if I'm making a fried rice, a stir fry, I potentially could use this like in place or in addition to like a protein powder or like a protein shake, like as the base. Like these are the kind of things, and it really lends to that creativity. And it also speaks to when we are as a whole exploring new technologies, particularly around food. Not only is this better for the planet, not only does it create opportunities in places that maybe had seen a dip in economic activity, but this is also really fun and exciting and lends itself to creativity. And so
absolutely, food is something that people enjoy, and it's something that we share, and it's something that's infused with cultures and habit, and so it's exciting for us to be part of that new food, right? And we want to bring similar sort of I'm looking forward 100 years from now, kids would say, when I was young and my mother was cooking the Phi, that would be great.
There's so much about this that can capture the imagination. You all are in the rare class of few Chicago companies that have raised over $100 million in funding. And it's, even, you don't need me to say this, but even in the interactions we've had, it's amazingly apparent why. Are you able to share, maybe an anecdote or two about what it is when you're going for funding and you have to present this in the very, like straightforward, this is how this makes sense on a business case, and it strikes the moment, etc. What is it? Have you found trends about where that light bulb turns in? Especially for these folks who are hearing 7 revolutionary pitches a day. Like what is it that really turns on the light bulb?
So I think everybody has probably different strategy depending on what they're trying to do. So we raised capital twice. We did the first round of funding, and we just, as we discussed earlier, we completed our second round of funding. The second round of funding was led by 2 groups that we're very, very excited to have around the table, and one of them is Breakthrough Energy Venture, which is one of Bill Gates' investment vehicle. It's not just Bill Gates, it's Bill Gates started this fund, and he had a bunch of like-minded billionaires who chip in. It's a $1 billion fund. And it's Bill Gates, it's Jeff Bezos, it's Jack Ma, it's basically people who dedicated money to support companies who have technology that can impact positively climate change. So we're very excited to have them co-lead this round. And the other group that's co-leading here is called Generation. And Generation is a very large fund. It's actually, it was co-created and shared by Al Gore. So it's, again, having Bill Gates and Al Gore kind of as a co-leader here.
Absolutely.
It's very exciting for us, and it's exciting that they are excited. Right? These guys see everything, and the fact that they're excited about our technology enough to fund us is, it's great. It's exciting for us, exciting for our team. It's great. We're very psyched about that. So we also have a local investor who is ADM, Archer Daniel Midlands, and we have a French, the French food company Danone, as well as another VC firm from Silicon Valley, which is called 1955. So I think, when you get into the money trail, I think as an early stage pre-revenue company, the more you can make people understand what the end game is, and the more you can not do that with PowerPoints, the better off you are. And on the first, when we did the first round, and we really were a very small company, I had a Ziploc bag with chicken nuggets at Untitled. And so I was, meeting in a bunch of places around Silicon Valley and San Francisco. And in the middle of the meeting, I would just pull out my Ziploc bag and put a chicken nugget on the cold chicken nugget on the table. But the fact that I was able to do that every time changed the conversation. Yeah. Because instead of having the concept of what this could be, I am putting this in front of you. I'm putting this concept. It's not a concept. You can touch it. You can take a bite. You can feel the texture. So the closer you can get, even in like a demo mode, if you will, to what this is going to be at the end, what it is that you're going to do with the money that's going to be handed out to you, the more value and the more convincing it is. So my advice is, yes, make sure you tell that not from where you are, but from where you're going to arrive. And the more you can show that and present that, and of course, you have to make the case that this is valuable and that it makes sense and that there's going to be demand for it. And all of this are, of course, prerequisite. But again, the more you can make it tangible, I think, the better it is. So we, and on the next round of funding, for every meeting we took, it was basically in the form of a meal. So we were hosting the parties which were interested, and we were serving them a meal.
Simple as that.
Made entirely with our products.
And, I want to be mindful of your time, and if I could ask one last question, when you're a very skilled storyteller, as I stumble over this question, when you work with your team, when you work outside of the team, there is this end game that you're thinking of, this mix of helping to revolutionize our food system, of helping to continue to just make sustainability this accessible, enjoyable, thing that can really take root. What is, right now, when you look 5-10 years out, what is the end game you see, or at least the, some milestones you all really have in mind within the sustainability realm that you want to help contribute to?
I mean, for us, so let me answer your question through a side answer, if you will. So to
Absolutely.
me, when what I'm telling our team again and again and again is, to me, success will be when, one day I go and get into a restaurant and ask for a salad, and the waiter tells me, sir, which protein do you want with your salad? Do you want chicken? Do you want beef? Do you want tofu? Or do you want phi?
Yep.
I want to have phi on the list, right? That is, to me, that means that we've been able to make an impact, and we've been able to become a staple, like a common format of this new protein, just like a sort of new tofu with more texture and more variation in taste. So the impact of that would be something that, probably my kids will enjoy more than I will. It will be hopefully a little bit of a better planet, and that is really the goal. That is really what took us on this journey. I mean, it's just, what can we do to make things a little better? Not so much for us, but for the next generation, and for this little planet. It's the only one we have. It is the only planet we have. There's no planet B, right? That's, Mars maybe one day, but not now. So we need to take care of this. I mean, this is our home. We really need to take care of this. So for us, what does it mean? It means that you can do this only if you go fast and if you go big. I mean, you cannot have impact if you just want to be small and slow. It's just the reality of what it is. So we are going to be very keen in the years to come to develop aggressively our presence, not only in the US, but outside of the US, in Europe, in Asia. Fundamentally, if you want to have an impact on the protein crisis and making sure there's going to be enough protein, the real game is not about winning at the Whole Food in Palo Alto and in the East Village in New York, because the protein crisis there is not really a protein crisis.
Right.
It's going to be okay. The real protein crisis is going to be in China. It's going to be in India. It's going to be, and then it's going to be in Africa, which is going to add 1 billion people in the next few decades. So these numbers are phenomenal. We don't have the resources to feed these people with the protein. There's going to be carbohydrate and lipid for everyone. Protein is going to be challenged, especially protein in a form that we like. So that is our mission. That's what we need to do. And things are accelerating. Good things and bad things are accelerating. Climate change is accelerating. It's going to continue to accelerate. And we need to really push hard to bring these solutions, whether it's on, electricity generation, in food, in all sort of this legacy industry, and that need to change. We need to push hard now. And we know that the cruel joke is whatever we do know will only have an impact over time. And these things are going to take time. Climate change is baked in at this point, right? That's not a pessimistic view. It's a fact. Even if we could stop everything right now, it would still go up for a while. So it is urgent to start now and to have as much impact as we can, as fast as we can. It was. So having Bill Gates as an investor, I had a chance to, he invited the CEO of his company, and we had a chance to spend a bit of time with other people in his, with him. And he explained why he was doing what he was doing. He said, look, I realized that most governments are not going to be supporting the transformation that is required because it's going to be painful for the existing industry, and that's not going to be popular. So we, the billionaire, they're not running for office, right? So he said, we must support this technology and we must help accelerate this change. It's kind of funny to see all these things about, on the Twitters or on the internet sphere about Bill Gates being this bad guy or trying to make more money. I honestly think Bill Gates doesn't give a damn about making one additional dollar. He's actually giving most of it away. He doesn't have anything to prove to anybody. He's really pretty much past that stage. And it is really a mission. You know, I think he really belongs to this category of people who say, like, we need to do something now. And that's why he's doing, in many ways, what you would argue some governmental funding would help and it would be necessary to promote. But it's not there to the degree that it should be there. That's the reality.
We're in college, I studied China and, you know, the rise of kind of the resurgence of what I'm going to call the city-state almost. You know, these boomtown or mega city regions and how they're playing different roles and going through different channels that have global consequences, either around meeting their own food demand. You know, China needs to meet the food demand. That has changed their relationship with Africa and Latin America, which then impacts how our farmers operate, you know, given competition in the market for land and food products. And I think, you know, what you're saying is absolutely correct. We're seeing this class of billionaires also acting on a global stage to leverage resources, you know, in some of these instances to try, like, who recognize what you're discussing, that need for like urgency and stewardship on things, and saying, you know, whether it's looking at the 2030 or the 2050 metrics, like climate change is baked in, we need to move. Where are areas where we can move? Okay, food, agriculture, that is an area where we can have this impact. And so it's just a remarkable time to be alive, because whether you can look at someone, Bill Gates, whether you can look at, you know, people who are making sure on the grassroots that the, you know, individual urgency is felt and recognized kind of in mass media, or people like yourselves and your team at Nature's Fynd who are saying, we have this urgent need for stewardship and we have the capacity, and to meet it. These dynamics give me more hope for the future and appreciation for these types of actions.
Well, look, we like to say that we're a food company for optimists. So, and we have to be optimists. I mean, there's almost a moral imperative to be optimistic and to try to do things. I mean, it's a must. It's a moral imperative. We have to.
I think that's a fantastic note to conclude the first episode of the second season of the Chicago Sustainability Series. Thank you immensely, Thomas Jonas of Nature's Fynd, for sharing your insight, your story, your perspective, and the fact that you were doing this in the same ground in Chicago. Hope we can circle back once the product launches with another conversation. I cannot wait to try it, and thank you again so much.
Thank you.